you show me a young black man with a gun, I show you a young black man with no hope. So what we got to do is create more hope. And the way we create more hope, it ain't just these little feel good, stories or quotes. We got to really start investing in their life, man, and giving them something more to look forward to.
You are now part of a social experiment. See now where my limit is. Only got no.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today on the journey towards self-mastery. Our next guest was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. At 16 years old, he made a tragic mistake that would cost him 20 years in prison. After prison, he dedicated his life to giving back to his community and helping to be a part of the solution in Chicago. He now serves as a mentor, life coach, and violence interrupter to young black males in Chicago, teaching them emotional intelligence and life-saving decision-making skills. He has been featured in the documentary All These Sons and is the author of the book Until the Lion Speaks. Let's welcome today Mr. Billy Moore to the program.
Thanks
How you
for
doing
having
today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Mr. G. Really appreciate being here.
The pleasure is mine, man. The pleasure is mine. And I think we spoke. I told you that I've actually been watching you for quite some time because in my classroom we play the Benji documentary, and it's something that I try to teach my students about. Looking into how to prevent violence in situations and things like that. And we always analyze, your situation and the piece in which you had that encounter. So it was something that was bit in the back of my mind. But what motivated me to kind of get you on the program was when I saw that you had connected with Benji's younger brothers, and they forgave you for the incident, and you guys pretty much hashed everything out and were able to really resolve that conflict. And I think that's super important for the black community, for us to see things like that, because generally when things, like that happen, we think about retaliation and, I'm never forgiving dude. If I see him again, it's on sight kind of mind state. And I think it's powerful that y'all did that. And that's why I wanted to bring you on to the program. So I appreciate, the work that you're doing in Chicago, and, your ability to just be humble and to seek forgiveness, I think is powerful.
I think the one important thing to understand is that when you're involved in something so tragic, it creates a lot of emotions. The raw emotions of grief, is what kind of motivates, retaliation and revenge, right? And then once you consider the fact that, more so now than back then, a lot of people are really getting away with murder. The clearance rate is so low in Chicago that it's a high likelihood that if you kill somebody, you'll get away with it, right? So when people don't feel like there's no justice that will, prevail for them, when they lose someone, they tend to, revert to their own form of justice. And then, like I said, the grief of losing people are so strong and so deep. It creates these emotions, right, of anger. And for me to be able to, reconcile with Benji, two younger brothers, this was pretty much like, almost 30 years later. Of course, 30 years later, I wasn't the young man that pulled the trigger, and created the situation that led to Benji's death, and they wasn't the two young men who at the time lost their brother, although they were still grieving, because I don't think you ever stop grieving the loss of a loved one, right? But your the emotional content isn't as deep and isn't as raw 30 years later. It's a wound, but of course sometimes, wounds heal is not as deep. It leaves scars for you to always be able to look and remind yourself of how that wound was inflicted. But I think because them understanding or coming to understand what it was that I had been doing in my life, and I think also one of the brothers, Anthony, said that the reason why he was willing to forgive me was because he said literally on his mother's deathbed, the only thing she told him was that if you do nothing else, I need you to forgive the young man who took Benji's life away. And he told me, he was like, out of all the things that she would tell me before leaving this world, that was the one thing that she wanted me to do. So I had to honor that. And this is why I am, extending the forgiveness. And mind you, I had been home. This reconciliation took place in 2019, 2018. So I had been home you know, uh, like 16 years, 17 years, right? No, well, I went to jail and I had been home about 12 years, right? Which means that was like 32 years later. I had done my time, I had, for all intents and purposes, according to the law, I put it like that, I had paid my debt to society, right? But I felt as a black man, I felt that it was necessary that if these brothers was willing to extend forgiveness, then I should be able to sit across the table and ask them to forgive me, and it's never no closure to something like that, not fully, right? So I think this was also a lesson for us as a people that we should be able to, you know, be able to reconcile these things, right? The restorative justice that we need in our community that is lacking could, help enhance relationships within the community that can be destroyed and damaged, because of something like this. And how do we teach somebody that this is possible if no one is willing to do it, right? So, I think right now, when you think about retaliation, let's also think about reconciliation at the same time. Is that possible?
Yes, sir. And your situation that occurred was really a small part in the bigger picture of the story of Chicago and what's been happening in Chicago for decades. With the violence and the crime and the homicides. So we have this narrative of Chicago. There's all these movies, there's these documentaries, there's shows, the rappers, and the media paints this narrative of Chicago, especially the south side of Chicago, in regards to what's happening on the ground. They call it Chirac and all that stuff. You're on the ground, and you've been on the ground. This is your neighborhood. This is where you grew up at. This is where you're doing your work at. So, is the picture that is painted of Chicago? Do you feel like it is accurate, or are you seeing something else?
Yes, it's accurate, but that's only, the narrative of one side of the story, right? Because there's a part of Chicago that's so beautiful and so great, that people enjoy, you know, that if you came to Chicago, especially in the summertime, you'll probably have the best time of your life. I mean, you would experience a city, a world class city, that is generating so much money on a daily basis. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so much to do in Chicago. It's so many experience you can walk away with and feel definitely fulfilled. People live in the city, that come from other places and swear it's the best place they ever been, right? But, that's the tale of the two cities of Chicago because, Chicago has 77 communities and only 15 of those communities are those that are really suffering from gun violence or driving the gun violence, right? And those communities basically exist on the south and west sides of Chicago, right? When you look at those cities, the one thing that stands out the most, well, if you look at the communities, I'm sorry, though the one thing that stands out in those communities are that they are hyperly segregated. They are hyperly poverty stricken. I mean, in 2013, when Rahm Emanuel was the mayor, right? They closed 54 schools, grammar schools and high schools in Chicago, and they were all in those 15 neighborhoods. black and brown communities, right? And what that did was, created, you know, uh, the mindset that certain people wasn't worth investing in. When we talk about schools, right? Where is it that you are preparing, anyone for whatever it is to be uh, their next step in life? Schools are institutions that creates leaders, right? Schools are the places where we invest in our kids and their education and their intelligence, their mental capacity. You learn everything in school. I mean, at school you experience some of your firsts, right? No matter what that is. And when you have already uh, so many people fighting for so much or so little resources, then on top of that, you close these schools and you compound other schools with students, from other neighborhoods, right? And now you have this dynamic to where you crossing lines and you breaching borders, right? You sending kids to the other side of the tracks. They not going over there, you know. And that was 10 years ago, right? Now you think about kids that was in grammar school 10 years ago, they young adults right now, right? And we working with young men from 18 to 25. We'll go all the way up to 35, to be honest, right? Who we have identified as being at acute risk of being involved in gun violence. We used to identify these young men as being at acute risk of being a victim and or a perpetrator. But I don't even distinguish the two. They are at risk of being involved in gun violence, right? Because if you have a high risk of being a victim of gun violence, you have an even more higher risk of becoming a perpetrator of gun violence. So those are the young men that's kind of like the residual effect of the disinvestment. You know what I'm saying? In these communities, you done closed our schools. You done hyperly segregated these communities, which doesn't have a lot of access to all other beautiful communities and neighborhoods that Chicago, you know, have access to. If you and when I was saying earlier, if I've been to New York, I love New York. The one thing I see is that, New York has communities of diversity. So when you have a diverse community, more than likely, whatever group that can benefit the most, it's not just exclusive for them. If it's a diverse community, everyone has access to whatever that's going to have that community thrive, right? In Chicago, we got food deserts in these communities where people, the only thing they have access to is neighborhood corner stores that's selling flaming hots and nachos. You know what I'm saying? They don't have access to nutritional food, right? That's going to, create a healthy body, which means you're going to have a healthy mind. I already talked about the schools that they didn't close down. We're not educating our kids, right? So that's that they already building the infrastructure for the school to prison pipeline. You think about those communities, though, that's where your major crime is taking place at. That's where, major gun violence is taking place at. That's where young kids as young as 11 is carjacking people. I mean, it's like, it's an old proverb that says that, if the village doesn't, well, you done heard the proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, right? But there's another proverb that says if the village doesn't embrace the child, he's gonna burn it down just to feel the warmth. And that's what's happening, bro. Like we didn't just say F the village, right? We haven't invested in our kids. And it's been like this in Chicago for a long time. Like not just
Speaking of what you're saying with the long time, like a lot of people blame the kids in the village for what is happening and the gun violence and the murders and all that stuff. But a lot of people say these things have been, brewing for in Chicago for decades, based on how the housing was made there, and the like you mentioned the resources and things like that. But Chicago had a lot of high rise buildings, and it was a lot of concentrated poverty. So these things just didn't happen just by themselves, you know?
No, I mean the history of Chicago. When you look at the Great Migration, you know, people were basically put in certain communities and kept there, right? And because Chicago, and when you think about at the time that people were coming to Chicago, there was a lot going on. It was an industrial revolution. Then you had wars taking place. You had World War II take off. So a lot of white people was going off to fight the wars, and more black people had opportunities to come up here and get jobs, right? But they did, so at the risk of just not being able to live wherever they want to live, they had to live in these concentrated areas, right? And as these concentrated areas started expanding, white folks made sure that they wasn't going to expand into the communities that they had cherished, right? So what they did, instead of uh, opening up these communities, what they did, they started building on top of the communities that we was already in, and start building what is called public housing projects, right? And you take a neighborhood and you put 100,000 people, you know what I'm saying, within a 20-block span, right? Instead of letting them expand out, you build them up, and you keep them concentrated. And then over, you know, 30, 40 years, you walk away from them. You don't invest in them. They decay. They should be abandoned. You know what I'm saying? Some of them buildings didn't even have heat in them, right? And you had families that grew up in those communities. When they got so bad, you had to tear them down. You know what I'm saying? Then people spread it out, right? But it's still highly concentrated segregation, because you know you only gonna be allowed to go move or live in certain places, which creates problems too, because you got people that's already there, and the community dynamics and politics, come into play. Chicago is a gang cultured city. It's a little different now because the gang dynamics, you know, when you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s, or you're going back to the 60s, the gangs really formed just to protect themselves against white mobs, right? And they became so organized, you know what I'm saying? Didn't have access to jobs, so they created the underworld economy, right? The black market. People started selling drugs, right? And then once the crack game took off, what came next was mass incarceration. So once they started locking people up, it tore up the gang structure, right? And you had this vacuum. So a lot of cats was going away to prison in the 80s and the 90s, and they was getting life sentences. You know what I'm saying? And they kids started growing up, and they didn't have that gang structure. They had the gang mentality, but not the gang structure. You know, and now you have, the click gangs, right? You have a little small group of little guys that's out here that can form, and they gonna protect themselves against anybody, right? So it's a different dynamic um, that we see that we're up against, but it's still the same lack of resources and access, right? That plagues the systemic aspect of what we facing.
Yes, sir. And speaking of that, like Chicago has its share of celebrities, activists, leaders, politicians, on, professional athletes, the list goes on and on, right? Why do you think that a lot of these problems haven't been dealt with when we have people in the community that have resources and the financial means to be able to create some change?
I just think it's so hard, man, for people to come together. Chicago is one of those cities that, it's always been, I don't know, for it's that crab in the barrel syndrome. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so hard to get ahead. So many people are game conscious. But what I will say, with all the important people and celebrated people that then came from this city or then lived in this city, uh, you do have people that put back and give back. And one brother in particular who I tip my hat off to is the brother Joakim Noah. Uh, Joakim Noah, was playing in Chicago, he purposely wanted to go and spend time in the communities that were suffering the most. And just be a part of, just being visible and approachable, right? And he met people that was doing the work. One of my close friends named Kobe Williams, right? He was in the documentary The Interrupters. And I think Joe King saw The Interrupters, right? And him and Kobe became close. So Joe King created through his non-for-profit Noah's Ark, they did this basketball league, this one city basketball league. And last year they brought together like 20 CVI organizations, community violence intervention organizations, where they all brought a team, and they competed, throughout this tournament. And I think this is something that they're gonna do every year. So we're really trying to invest in these guys, through sports. We're trying to awaken the conscience of the type of investment that's really needed, because community violence intervention is not just going to get us to where we need to go. You have to really address the systemic issues of what created, you know, uh, the situation that we deal with right now, this gun violence, uh, and that's a major lift. Uh, I work for an organization called Chicago Cred, which is one of the biggest community violence intervention organizations in Chicago, started by the former Secretary of Education under Obama, Arnie Duncan, who is from Chicago. And for all intents and purposes, Arnie, being the head of Chicago Public Schools before going to Washington, D.C. and becoming the education secretary, decided to come back to Chicago, like you said, and invest back into the city to try to address gun violence. And Arnie lost a lot of people, man, growing up in Chicago playing ball. And the interesting story between me and Arnie Duncan is that, when he was in high school and college playing ball, him and Benji was close friends. They competed against each other. So when Benji passed away, needless to say, Arnie, it would be fair to say he probably hated me, you know. And but when Arnie came and started Chicago Cred, I was I got my job for Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, because Arnie's organization wanted to expand their youth program, their Green Reentry program, to help young guys that were gang involved and at risk of being involved in gun violence to be a part of that program. And that's how I got my job. So me and Arnie ended up meeting each other because of that. And he seen, how sincere I was. And he didn't want to be a hypocrite and hold on to this animosity, right? Because he know that's the root of what we facing and what we trying to address. How do we mediate conflicts and resolve issues that they don't continue to become, you know, problems that people end up losing their life.
And
So
speaking of that, I do want to get into the altercation that existed before with Benji, but before then, I kind of want to get into kind of who you were at that time and your upbringing and everything. And one of the things that you've mentioned in the documentary that you were a part of was that you didn't have the emotional tools in that moment to be able to deal with that situation in the way that it needed to be dealt with in a constructive way. So I just wanted to get a little piece of just your upbringing, who you were before that incident.
yeah, I mean, growing up on the south side of Chicago, my mother and father, they were separated, but they was active and raising me. I had the love of the extended family, my grandmother, grandfather. I had a lot of cousins. My father he was active in my life, but at 15 years old, my father died of cancer. My mother, she was working, to continue to support me. And, I was a young cat on the south side of Chicago, and heavily, influenced by the presence of what was going on in the community, the gang culture, right? I mean, just living in the community or the neighborhood that I lived in, it was almost like a rite of passage. you know, to get involved in that, right? Because it was almost one of those things where, you looked up to the cat that was on the corner that was somewhat what you would say holding down the neighborhood, right?
Right.
And you wanted to be a part of that. It was attractive. It was sexy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It gave us something to kind of look up to. And for a lot of us who didn't have fathers in the household, those uh, street organizations is what taught us manhood. You know what I'm saying? We had literature. There was principles built around, you know, being a member. You know, so those are the things that kind of pull me in and just getting involved, and but still being a young cat, very impressionable, trying to posture and prove himself. And that's with everybody. Um, the one thing that we as young men and growing up in these communities have a hard time identifying is who we are. I say we suffering from a major identity crisis, right? Because a lot of times we're trying to live up to the perception of how other people perceive us based off what they think or how we may respond in any situation. And a prime example, if we out there, somebody, disrespect you and call you out your name, right? So what you basically have to do now is prove to everybody who heard that disrespect that that's not who you are. And this person trying to define you through the disrespect, now you have to redefine yourself based off shaping their perception of you on how you're going to deal with that in the moment, right? Because we haven't lived long enough, or no one has really molded into us a true identity of who we are. So there's some insecurities there, right? And we trying to find ourselves, and we basically struggling with this identity crisis, right? And we trying to, I can't let nobody disrespect me, because if they think I'm a punk or whatever, they gonna always treat me like a punk, right? So we tend to make these decisions, and sometimes they're not the right decisions, and violence is so much revered. You know what I'm saying? The savage is so much looked up to, right? People may say, man, I know you ain't gonna let them talk to you like that. I know you ain't, and all of a sudden, so, as we go, as we grow older and we start finding more things to value outside of other people's opinions, and what becomes more important in our life as we grow as people, then we are more able mentally and emotionally, you know what I'm saying, to define our own selves, right? Because what we do as adults, or what we can do as adults, is allow the perception of others to define our reality, right? Because in your youth, you have created, or made mistakes by trying to prove to other people that's not who you are, right? Based off what somebody else has said. And in our communities, particularly in, communities where you have this heavily gang involved presence, right? Everybody is posturing, man. Everybody's trying to prove something, right? And more than likely, it's all about what you're trying to prove to other people that you're not, or who you are, until you really don't even know who you are, your own self. You're trying to prove to yourself, you know. So we just have to, that's why it's so important to have mentors, right? And to get involved and stand in the gap for these young cats, man, and teach them, you know, what is more important to you besides how other people think. I talk to these young guys and I let them know, man, bro, the greatest gift that we all been given is the ability to think, right? The time we find ourselves in crisis, the one thing we reach for is the weakest thing we have, is our feelings, our emotions, right? And all because we trying to prove to somebody else what we not. You know what I'm saying? Based off the situation at hand. So we learn how to start thinking, you know, instead of always trying to prove ourselves because we in our feelings, we may find ourselves with less regrets. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
I agree. I agree. So looking at, your situation that occurred when you were 16 with Benji Wilson, I want to look at it from the standpoint of the way that I guess you try to teach your young men that you work with about making good decisions and not having those type of moments. So I want to analyze that day and look at what was said, what was done, how it was handled, and what could have been done differently. So can you just start off with what that day started out being for you and walk us through that?
The thing that went wrong to begin with happened way before I even got up to the school. And
Mm,
what went wrong that morning was when I got that gun, right? As soon as you pick the gun up, I always say now, if whoever carrying a gun, you're going to get gun problems.
hmm.
It's going to
So
be
for
so.
those that don't know, why did you have a gun with you that day?
So the day before that, my cousin Cynthia, right, who went to Simeon, was at the Simeon school store, maybe a half a block away from the school, playing on one of the games, right? And some guy came from behind her and went inside her purse and took some money out. I think it was $10. And when she realized what was going on and turned around, asked him, for her money back, he basically proceeded to put the money down in front of his pants and told her, if you want it, come get it, right? So she like, okay, I'm gonna get my money back. So she came and told me, her brother, a couple of my guys. So the next day, basically, we was going to get our money back, you know. And being a young guy, 16 years old, I'm thinking in my mind, this gun is definitely giving me more of a presence, people gonna respect, right? Uh, Never really quite fully understanding the consequences that can come with. But when you think about, you know, you know how you thinking, but you don't know how this other person may be thinking. When you find yourself in that moment of approaching this person, right? Who took this money. You just basically thinking, and I'm hoping that if he saw the gun, hey, he gonna bow down, he gonna get the money back, or maybe he gonna have. I'm never thinking he may have a gun too. That's from the 16-year-old mindset that, and also keep in mind, you posturing too, man, because like, man, I can't let nobody just disrespect my people like this, right? And accept that, right? But are you really ready to deal with what comes with all this, right? Not thinking. So anyway, long story short, we go up there. I know a couple of people in the neighborhood, and I talk to a guy who basically, everybody respect. I tell him what happened. He like, man, don't even trip. I know dude, and gave my cousin $20, right? So we just up there, and that was like early in the morning, like 9:30, 10 o'clock, right? We up there. So I got, family, other family, and friends that go to Simeon, right? So I run into a chick named Erica, who I've been knowing, basically all my life. And I see her, right? And I'm like, man, what's happening? So after she come out to school, and we've been up there for a few hours, at least 2, 3 hours, right? She come out, me and her walking, and I don't know Benji, right? She know Benji, but I don't know Benji. I guess they was probably maybe a half a block behind us. By the time we get back to the same store where the guy who took my cousin money at, Erica walks in the store. I'm standing outside the store, and out of nowhere, I get shoved from behind, right? It ain't like a little bump or tap. I get like purposely, intentionally shoved out the way. So as I gather myself, you know, I fell into this other young lady standing next to me named Kim. I turns around just to see that I know whoever did this has to be coming with an apology. You know what I'm saying? Because it was just too hard, right? And I see the brother just keep walking. But man, he had to be the biggest dude I ever seen in my life. Right. Literally a giant, you know. So I'm right now I'm 56 years old. I'm 205 pounds. I'm 5'10". 16, I was 135 pounds and 5'6". Benji was 6'8". He had a trench coat on, right? So he looked more imposing, but he was slim, but he just looked just in my mind, he was like a giant, right? I ain't never seen nobody that big in my life. But at the same time, it's like, man, bro, you just gonna disrespect me like that. And I asked him, ain't you gonna say excuse me? Long story short, he turned around and he was like, man, now what? Now I ain't saying excuse me. You know what I'm saying? I like what's up? You know what I'm saying? Now, as I look back on this whole situation years later and just trying to understand why did this occur, right? I came to find out some things, you know what I'm saying, Benji was going through. He had just been kicked out of school. He was up at school practicing because it was the game. It was the day before his first game of his senior year. And Benji had just got ranked #1 in the nation over the summer at a basketball camp. They had just won the state title in his junior year. So they was about to play the school that they beat in the state title. And this is going to be his first game. So he was coming to practice. But what happened was Benji had been suspended from school because he had punched the teacher the week before that. And I think the baseball coach saw him up there and told the principal that he needs to leave because when you suspend my players, you make them, serve out their suspension. That was one reason. Then come to find out, he was walking with his girlfriend who had just had they baby about a month ago. And they had some issues where she wasn't letting him see the baby, right? And then it's been said that, Benji had a little thing going on with Erica, the young lady who I was walking with. So needless to say, Benji wasn't having a good day. And I believe it was some misdirected anger that got taken out on me, you know. And because of the exchange, right, and the disrespect, and now I'm feeling, like I'm being punked, you know. But I'm also seeing that, damn, this dude here, he ain't bagging down, right? So I'm trying to tell him, like, hey, okay, then you need to see this. And I unzip my jacket so he can see the gun, thinking that he gonna stand down. And man, what he was like, man, so what you gonna do with that? Basically like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, damn, bro, you gonna make me pull this gun out, and use it. And what I don't want to happen is that you take this gun from me and use it on me because I don't know you. And his girlfriend, she getting hysterical and everything. She trying to put him away. The world come to find out what happened next. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, I felt like in that moment, I didn't have a chance but to defend myself, right? Now, I will say this, if we eliminate the gun, right, I don't know how the situation plays out. You know what I'm saying? But what I will say is that it's very likely Benji would probably still be here. You know what I'm saying? Uh, I don't know, but I think, when we that young and we have uh, these issues of immaturity of how we try to handle conflict, that's why I talk about not having the emotional tools to really just address situations like that without it getting to the point to where it got. You know what I'm saying? How do we resolve conflicts in these moments where they don't end up becoming tragedies? You know what I'm saying?
So let's say like if we just do the we reverse it back and you have the same awareness that you have right now in the 16-year-old body of Billy Moore, how do you handle that same situation?
I can only, probably respond from where I'm at now mentally, right? I would like to think that if I had the same, maturity level that I have now at 16, of course, hey, look, bro, first and foremost, I think you can't take a lot of things personal when people don't know you. You know what I'm saying? It's them having a problem, not you. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's still a challenge for some men to walk away from certain situations, right? But for
Especially when hands has been put on you.
yeah, but by me having experience, you know what I'm saying, the loss of 20 years of my life and my mother dying on me in prison, and I suffered a lot. You know what I'm saying? I'm still here, but you know, I mean, I have been in those situations since then,
Mm.
and been able to deal with that in a way that everybody walked away. You know what I'm saying? Not even having to think about it no more. You know what I'm saying? But that's the challenge for young men who, for all intents and purposes, the only thing that they have is what they can claim is they rep, or beyond that they ain't got nothing else, so they gonna stand on that, they gonna protect it, right? But I think that situation plays out a lot, and it doesn't turn into tragedies for the most part. Unfortunately, they do happen. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, it happened then. I know that for me, I would never allow that situation to happen again. Me being a part of it, but it's hard to intercede in those situations because they play out with young men who aren't mentally, emotionally equipped with being able to deal with conflict in a moment like that, right? So we got to do the best we can by being active in young men's lives, particularly our own sons, right? And teaching them, what's important, and what's worth it and what's not worth it, and they'll see it, even though, you're trying to teach them. What's going to come across more as the way you live in your life too, you know. And I think that's one of the things that we suffering from, because a lot of our communities are so fractured. We don't have, men in the household raising these kids, or just strong, presence of men, teaching young boys how to think,
Yes,
through
sir.
problems,
Yes, sir. Now, one of the things too, I know that you mentioned to boys when you talk about this incident is that you should have never been carrying around a gun. Now, we live in a situation, especially in Chicago, in the South Side of Chicago, where if a young man is used to carrying around a gun in order to feel protected, they might be like, "Yo, if I don't have my gun on me, you know what I'm saying, and everybody else does, then I'm gonna be at a disadvantage. I'm gonna be walking around unprotected." So, how do you maneuver through? Don't carry a gun, but everybody else in my hood has a gun and carries theirs.
So we deal in realism. I'm not telling nobody to put their gun down, unfortunately, right? Because I understand what's at stake. You know what I'm saying? But I will say this, for young men who are carrying guns, it's almost like being in the crap game and you got to roll 7 every time you shoot. Because it's easy to crap out. The police can get you. You know what I'm saying? You find yourself in a position where you got to use it. I understand that we have created these environments that are so unsafe, and you feel like you have to protect yourself, right? And it's unfortunate because it's a great paradox that's going on in America. They criminalize black people for carrying guns when certain communities raise their kids up before they can even barely walk. They teaching them how to use guns, right? So it's this double standard. You know what I'm saying? It's unfortunate that we are looked at, you know, as being threats, and we have to, we over criminalize the black community any way we can. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And if I mean a traffic stop result in black people sometimes losing their life, right? You don't
Right.
hear that in white communities. You know what I'm saying? Somebody get pulled over for a traffic violation, either they going home or they going to jail. They're not going to the morgue, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the narrative around, you know, black people being criminalized, you know what I'm saying, is something that is real. So when we talk about young black men carrying guns for their safety, you know what I'm saying, it's not realistic to tell, the brother to put your gun down. But we do have to make you aware of the risk that you're taking, and are you prepared to deal with the consequences if, in fact, you find yourself either getting caught with it or having to use it. You know what I'm saying? So let's try to get these brothers thinking in the right state of mind so that we can get to the point to where everybody is carrying a gun, we can have them thinking, more safely. Like, we want to try to eliminate these hostilities that creates gun violence, right? By by getting more involved in these young cats' life and giving them something a little bit more than what they got now. Because most guys, you show me a young black man with a gun, I show you a young black man with no hope. So what we got to do is create more hope. And the way we create more hope, it ain't just these little feel good, stories or quotes. We got to really start investing in their life, man, and giving them something more to look forward to. You know what I'm saying? Because these young cats, they're not babies, right? They got kids and they got responsibilities. They trying to live and survive and they trying to eat. You know what I'm saying? And the hustle game ain't what it was. You know what I'm saying? Uh, you know, back in the 90s where a cat could get a bag and he feed the whole block. Now you got to have a level of sophistication. They doing fraud, they cracking cards, and you may not be able to feed your whole team like that. You know what I'm saying? So people is hurting out here, man. People is starving and trying to survive, and they struggling, right? So the dynamics is a little different.
I look at your situation as a really huge like learning lesson for a lot of young cats that are dealing with some of these things. Another thing too is that with the prison system, a lot of times it creates a worse person like coming out, and then that's why a lot of us go back in once we're in there. But your situation was a little bit different. First off, like after the incident occurred, you got tried as an adult. I mean, this happened at 16 years old, man. Like, and you turned 17 when the court case occurred, and they tried you as an adult. So why do you think they tried you as an adult? And then how did you maneuver your sense of self, your self esteem for 20 years? And I know, like you mentioned in your book too that you spoke to Larry Hoover, and he gave you some wise words, and you know that helped you out a lot too. But can you walk us through that, like why you got tried as an adult, and then how you manage emotionally and with your self esteem for the next 20 years?
So first and foremost, like I just talked about the criminalization of the black community, right? Is to really kind of always checkmate us, right? From the time they brought us over here and enslaved us, right? They always tried to find a way to checkmate us, right? So, we went through this long period of slavery, right? Where everybody, was property of somebody else. And then, black people were able to be free, right? And, when you think about even the United States Constitution, I'm sure you're aware of it, when the 13th Amendment, freed slaves, right? Ended slavery. The 14th Amendment, guarantees you due process, right? But with the exception of, you know, having a criminal offense could return you back into slavery, right? So they came up with vagrancy laws and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying in no way I'm great, right? But I believe greatness exists in everybody. At some point, hopefully it can manifest and you can, realize your greatness and you can become a hell of a podcaster where you highlighting people's stories. You know what I'm saying? But did you think you was going to be doing this 15, 20 years ago? You know what I'm saying? Have you made any mistakes that didn't rise to the public awareness that could have sent you to prison? My mistake is for public opinion, public view now because it's a criminal conviction, right? If they could have got you at 16 and tried you as an adult, you don't think they would have? So they can stop you from even having a voice that can expose and amplify and magnify other people that are doing great things, you know. So they didn't know Billy Moore was going to be able to help other young men try to see down that dark tunnel the light at the other end because he traveled down it. They just wanted to make sure that I got lost in that tunnel. You know what I'm saying? That's why they close all our schools, because they don't want young black men, you know what I'm saying, growing up to be great. If we can kill them or put them in prison, you know what I'm saying, or put them in a situation that a criminal background going to always keep them checkmated, then that's what they're going to do, you know. So we have to learn how to complicate that narrative and not buy into it. You know what I'm saying? In spite of these obstacles that they put in front of us. A lot of times brothers go to prison because of the circumstances that they surviving in. They only left to do certain things. So, and basically they taking that chance. They shooting that dice, man. They trying not to crap out. You know what I'm saying? But it's a hard gamble because the circumstances that we exist in, the margins that we live in is so small. Once we step outside of them, you know, you're a felon, right? You didn't broke the law. Now, if I get caught, I know what the consequences is, and it's gonna be me going to prison. And now that I got this criminal conviction, it's almost impossible for me to have a fair chance to overcome that once I'm released. They say I paid my debt to society, but guess what? I'm still paying my debt to society because society expects me not to reoffend, but they're gonna put me in a position to reoffend because I'm never gonna have an opportunity to overcome that criminal conviction. They're going to criminalize my criminal conviction. No, you can't have a job because you went to prison. No, you can't go to school because you went to prison. No, you can't live over here because you went to prison. But they tell you, become a law-abiding citizen, never reoffend again when you get out, right? They never allow you, for all intents and purposes, to live beyond your criminal conviction. So, you know, it's hard, but it's not impossible. You know what I'm saying? For you to overcome that, you always gonna have some restrictions, right? But it's not impossible, and you just got to be willing, man, and make up your mind. You're gonna be as productive as you possibly can within the law, within the guidelines of the law, right? You just got to make up your mind. You're not gonna break the law. You know what I'm saying? And just believe that there's something out here for you that you can create for yourself, man, where it's helping other people or just, you know. But the thing about, to answer your question, man, I believe that at 16 years old, you know, for me to do what I did, you know, they created a way to, you know, adjudicate me as an adult, right? Because I don't think that they ever looked at us with the empathy and the compassion that you should have for a child, for a juvenile. They're going to always look at you as being, you know, as an adult, right? They don't
You know,
see.
you know, I'm thinking about the documentary, Benji's documentary, and the lawyer that was going against you. He's like, he's coming to grips with how hard he was going during the trial. And he was like, God, they're young. They're awfully young. He's like, they're awfully young. God, they're young. But he's like, I had to do my job. So it really made me think about that situation. Like if it was a 16-year-old white boy, I don't think that would be his take on that situation. You know what I'm
Hey,
saying?
you know what? Just think about during the time of enslavement. They didn't allow us to read or write. That was illegal. And guess what? When you was around 8 years old, that's when they put you in the field until you couldn't work no more. So they took the young bodies, kids, and they worked them as they was adults. They didn't invest in your mind to allow you to become educated, right? It's no different today, bro. They want to get you as young as you can. They want to create circumstances to make it so vulnerable for you to fall through the cracks. And they're gonna throw the book at you. They don't care nothing about you being a kid. They're gonna take your young body and throw it in that prison. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully your mind never grows beyond that. So you can continue to repeat the cycle over and over again in your life.
And just to highlight what you're just saying right now too, when you got into the prisons, like you mentioned in your book, like they tried to take your life, right?
Yeah, when I went to the Cook County Jail Division 6, you know, and this is during the time of the 80s, bro. They was in there killing people left and right, hanging people, beating people to
Mm.
death. And that's just what the culture was. I had two uncles that worked in the county jail, and I just read the play. I knew something wasn't right. I wrote my mother's number down and told the guy, I say, listen, man, call my mother, tell her to get in touch with my uncle because it looked like they about to do something to me and get out here right now. Right. And they accused me of using gang talk. Right.
Mm.
So they have this way of addressing guys that's in prison, and you supposed to respond by saying, yes, sir, I'm an inmate, right? They asked me what gang I was in. I didn't know no better. I told them, and they proceeded to jump on me. And then they took me in the boiler room in the basement of Division 6 and said that I was basically going to write a letter to my mother saying I couldn't cope.
Mm.
So because I knew that I had gave this guy my mother's number and told him to call her and have my uncle them come out here, I was just hoping that he did it, one, and two, that they answered, right? And both happened. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Because they basically told me I wasn't walking up out the boiler room alive.
Wow.
And this was the second day after I had turned 17 years old, you
Man.
know? And I knew right at that moment that, man, if I walk up out this boiler room, then whatever I have to deal with, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to be prepared to deal with it because I couldn't allow myself, to fold and just, just without a fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. And
But yeah,
after that whole incident, you mentioned too in your book that you ran into, Larry Hoover. You guys had the same lawyer and everything, and he put you guys together. And he told you some real positive words that really encouraged you. So can you share with us what that conversation was with Larry
yeah.
Hoover?
So, and Larry was he was charged. He was charged along with 16 other guys for starting a riot that he didn't start in this prison called Pontiac. And they became known as the Pontiac 17. If you look them up, it's this thing, it's real big, right? And during that trial, when they was actually on trial for their life because 3 prison guards in Pontiac was killed, right? So they was charging Larry and all them. But the lawyer who represented Larry at that time on the Pontiac 17 and some of the other guys became my lawyer, Skip Gant. So when I caught my case, right, Skip was like, man, I represented Larry, right? So make sure, you check in with him when you go down there, right? So when I hit Stateville, one of the guys was like, man, Chief wanna holler at you, man. So I'm like, damn, like this Larry, you know what I'm saying? Like this dude like a urban legend, you know what I'm saying? And I'm about to meet him, right? So, when I go over there, he was like basically like, man, what you gonna do? You know? So I'm like half starstruck and half like don't want to say the wrong thing to look stupid, right? And he was like, man, I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna go to school. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna go to school. Just simple as that. And it was like, shit, okay. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to school, right?
You were.
you know,
OG said it. Yep.
yeah, because he basically was like, man, we need people, man, not just, on this end. We need people on that end too. You need people thinking, man, educating themselves, right? Moving the needle in the community. Larry is a true organizer. And I think Larry loved black people, And man, I can say that not only did I go to school and get my GED in prison, I got my associate's degree in prison, and I got my bachelor's degree since I've been home. You know what I'm saying? And it was all because, you know, not so much because Larry told me to, but that's what kicked it off. But, I realized that, education will open up doors for people. And in spite of the fact of what you look like, the color of your skin, or what you may have in terms of your background, education still open up doors. People respect a level of education, right? Which will leverage and mitigate any of that other stuff that people will look down on, you know. And I wanted to tell young brothers that listen, man, You know, education still has a level of value and respect that you will get from people if you have it. And that was one of the reasons why I went back to school, because I don't want to be saying this and didn't really show that I had this. You know, it's like these young cats, like, man, you have to have your credibility ain't what you say, it's what you do, it's what you got, what you done earn. So, you know, and I ain't really the school type of dude, but I felt it was important that, you know, I got my education, man, because I wanted to give these brothers a real message. I wanted to be the message that I bring. If I could do it, I know you could do it, man. And I guarantee you that will get you in places that other people just don't get in if they don't respect you as a person. They're going to respect what you done earned, what you done got. They know the process.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you did your, your time, and then once you get released, you had an option to leave Chicago and stay with some family. And a lot of people would say, like, you went through hell in Chicago. Like, there's no reason for you to even stay there and just being, possibly getting in trouble again. What made you at that time make the decision to stay in Chicago?
Well, it was two reasons. One, I had a son, um, and I knew that I needed to be with my son, right? Who was in Chicago. That was really the main reason. And then the second reason, I'm gonna be honest, man, I love Chicago. You know, I couldn't imagine the fact of doing 20 years in prison, right? Being taken away from the only home I've ever known, the only city I've ever known, to go somewhere. Remind you, going to prison was not my choice, right? I didn't go voluntarily, right? So it was not like I decided to move away on my own, right? So when it was time for me to get out, man, you know, I had an uncle who he's from Chicago, but he ended up going to school to Bradley University, which is in uh, maybe maybe 2 hours south of Chicago, right? And he made his home in Peoria. That's the city that he lived in, Peoria, Illinois. And you know, he was like, man, come on here, you know, like just get yourself a fresh start. You know what I'm saying? This, that, and other, right? And I was like, okay. But then I thought about my son, and I thought about what he needed from me. And like I say, Chicago was my home, man. I often thought about Chicago every day while I was in prison. Saw things on TV, like, so I'm like, you know what? Peoria cool, but no, I'm going home. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then me going home, it helped me, you know, to where I'm at today, right? Because, you know, I lost my own son to gun violence, you know. Uh, and when my son was killed, right, that's when I started doing the work. Well, actually, I found myself doing uh, social service work maybe a year after I got out of prison, because the organization that helped me transition back was an organization that worked with returning citizens find jobs, right? People coming home from prison, they helped them find jobs. So they helped me get my CDL license. They helped me get my first job. They helped me get my first apartment, right? And because I had did everything that they was looking to see in terms of success and their clients, right? I was hitting all their benchmarks. You know, my name started being noticed by, you know, people in their leadership, in their executive leadership, right? The chief operating officer who basically run the day-to-day operation, kind of like, who is this Billy Moore? You know what I'm saying? So me being in a mentoring program, I got a chance to speak at one of the graduations. I wasn't even graduating. And when she met me personally, you know, she was like, you know what? I don't think you need to be driving trucks. I think you need to be working with us, right? And she gave me a job. Uh, Maybe a year after that, uh, the president of the company was giving a keynote speech at the White House on prison reform and rehabilitation, right? And they wanted her to talk about someone that she knew personally who had overcame the struggles of coming home from prison, was able to be successful and, transition. And by me working with them, you know what I'm saying? Man, at that point I had helped like 200 guys get jobs and not recidivate and go back to prison. You know what I'm saying? And she was like, that's an easy pick right there. And she told my story at the White House, right? And it made me feel proud that she was able to use me as a success of what they were trying to do with helping people find a way back, you know what I'm saying, into society. And I worked there, man, for close to almost 12 years. I had got promoted. Then it's a non-for-profit. The particular department I worked in, we lost our funding. I lost my job, but and I like to tell the truth too. I keep it real, man. I got carjacked in 2008, Labor Day of 2008, right? Guy tried to shoot me in the back of the head, literally. Pulled the trigger, blew the head off my head, right? So yeah, I had a real close encounter, man, with almost losing my own life. And, I reflect back on what took place with me and Benji. I'm gonna be honest with you, bro. I always felt like the 20 years I did wasn't enough for what I had did or what I had caused. You know what I'm saying? Because even at 16, because Benji is never gonna be here, right? And I did 20 years in prison. I've had an opportunity to come home and live my life and, do some things. It's going to be 20 years, this August that I've been home, right? But when I got carjacked and it came close to losing my own life, I decided to do something stupid, man. I got a gun just to protect myself, right? So at the time, the young lady I was with, things weren't working out. We ended up going our separate ways. So I moved in with my cousin and, one night the police came and basically raided the crib. And they found the gun that I had in the closet. And I ended up, man, going back to jail. You know what I'm saying? I had to cop out for 2 years, bro. And I had been doing so good. And it wasn't like I was riding around with the gun. You know what I'm saying? But it was like, that was a mistake that I had made. It was real stupid. So I said, and I'm like, man, I had got myself, not just a job, I got myself into a career where I was helping people. So I thought I had lost it all, right? I didn't think I was never going to get back what I had was able to get, or more, right? But when I came home, I did 11 months, right, for that gun case. So I'm saying, okay, let me just make sure that I never make this mistake again. You know what I'm saying? And that was around the time that my son had got killed. And it was always on my mind that, it was like a sacrifice that I was going to have to give for what I did to Benji. And when my son got killed, and he was killed by mistaken identity, right? Yeah, some guys thought that he was his friend who they was at and ended up killing him. I knew right then and there the grief that I had caused, and the pain that I had inflicted on Benji's family, right? And immediately in my heart, I had extended forgiveness to whoever it was that did that, right? They never arrested nobody for killing my son. And he got killed July 6, 2017. So no one had ever been arrested. But, I reconciled with that. And I was like, you know what? It is what it is. So I need to really just be able to start helping young men like my son. You know what I'm saying? So they won't lose their life. And like me and like Benji, right? So I got the opportunity to get my job with Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, because Arnie's organization had just started a year before that to address gun violence in Chicago. Because of their support to Iman, it expanded their program, which allowed me to get the job as a lead case manager. And I started working the first day of my the day I was supposed to start working was the day of my son's funeral. They called me, they offered me the job. They were like, "Can you attend this training Friday?" And I was like, "I ain't gonna be able to attend it." They was like, "Why?" I say, "Man, it's my son's funeral, right?" And the executive director of the organization, his name is Rami. Rami wrote the intro to my book. You know, we need to hold off on, on this. It's understandable. Take enough time. It's not take as much time as you need. We're not gonna rescind the offer. But man, I say no, Rami. I say I ain't gonna be there Friday, but I'll be there Monday. Because I knew the young guys that I was gonna be working with, you know what I'm saying, was gonna be just like my son. They were gonna be like who I was when I was 16 and who Benji was, right? And man, I made my mark over there at Iman. You know, we they ended up doing a documentary the next year with our second cohort of all these sons. I worked for Iman for 3 years, and then I came and started working with Arnie's organization directly in 2020, April of 2020, and I've been there ever since. I'm running my own site right now. So yeah.
You know what's interesting too, like looking at the documentary, you kind of really get to learn about these young men and their lives and who they are. And I think a lot of times when we look at situations that occur in the community, like violence wise or whatever it is, it's like people outside us have this perception that these are these serial killers, these super gangsters that their emotions went out the window. They were raised to be cold and they're cold blooded. But this is not the reality. It's not what I saw in the documentary. So who exactly are these young men that you're working with, and what situations are they kind of faced with
Man,
that's
these
making them
young
make these emotional decisions?
man, you can look at your nephew, you can look at your little brother, you can look at the little cat that you speak to every morning. They live across the street or next door to you. Man, these are people. You know what I'm saying? They not these super predators. They human beings, man. It's so crazy how when you now I'm gonna tell you the funny thing about that is that a lot of our little guys, they rappers, right? So you'll see their videos. You know what I'm saying? You like these dudes here, they'll scare the hell out you, right? You see these, but then when you get them in the space, man, it's like that. They'll show that 8-year-old side of themselves to
They
you,
kids, yeah.
man, and they love you, bro, because you pouring into them. You know what I'm saying? They not bad people at all. Like, they and it's like, they have to show the world this image, right? But you get a chance to. I've always said the one thing I learned in this work, especially when you're dealing with a group of young men, right? When you get them in a space together, it's two things that I identify off the top, or it's two things that I see off the top. I see two identities. I see the individual identity, but then I see the group identity, right? And sometimes the group identity tends to overshadow the individual identity because he's doing so much, you know what I'm saying, to posture, right? But then when you start getting to know these guys on a one-on-one basis, right? And you see how vulnerable they are, and you see the true individual, and you really start bonding with these cats, you know what I'm saying? It tends to, you know, diminish the posturing, and that group identity fades away. You know what I'm saying? And once you get, I know, man, I done lost since I started working at Iman and with Cred in these last 7 years. I've lost 13 young men. One of them was my nephew. He's in the opening scenes of all these sons, right? And it's like, if I can keep these young men alive long enough, 3, 4 years into this process, bro, their risk of being a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence almost disappear because they start maturing, they start having kids, they start moving away, they start doing things, they priorities change. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yes, sir. I think you guys are kind of demonstrating too the power of having that black male influence.
Yeah.
That father figure that a lot of these young men don't have. Like, how that can change the trajectory of their lives.
Hey, let me tell you how important that was, especially at Iman, because Iman, we had what was called the intergenerational cohort. So we was working with cohorts. So we bring groups of guys in for a cycle, right? These 12-month cycles. So what we had was well, when I told you how Arnie's organization expanded the Green Reentry to work with 18 to 25 year olds, Iman was only working with older guys initially who was coming home from prison. And a lot of these older guys had did a lot of time, right? So now what happened when we started bringing the young guys in, we were able to bring these young guys in who didn't have those father figures raising them up, and then we had these older guys who didn't have the opportunity to raise their kids. And we able to bring them together and they shared the same space. And man, that was kind of like the secret to our success. And we built some strong relationships, man, that still is alive and functioning today, man. You know, all these young cats looking up to these older dudes, you know what I'm saying? And all these young older cats looking at these young cats and learning from them. You know, we had our ups and downs, and we became family, so we had issues, but man, we built some real love and some real bonds, man, and we became successful. You know what I'm saying? You know, I lost some guys, but man, I got more guys that I didn't lose. You know what I'm saying? Who done went and did some things different for themselves because of our involvement in their life.
Yes, sir. One of the things that I've heard you mention too is that a lot of these young guys, a lot of our young guys, they're learning how to deal with situations from a feminine perspective because they're being raised by women. They're being raised by aunties and their mothers and things like that. And they're not getting the masculine side of dealing with conflict and dealing with harnessing their emotions and what to do about it. So in your view, what is that, masculine side of dealing with conflict and emotions that you're trying to instill in these guys?
I think that when we have a young boy exposed so much to just these feminine tendencies that's governing his male energy, he tends to start responding to things based off what he's been exposed to, right? And a lot of that is just these emotional outbursts. Now, I don't want to make women seem like they're weak people, because I know some of these women are the most strongest element to our community. I value the sisters that work with us, man, because they get in places with these young dudes that we can't. And the reason why is because that's what these young cats are used to. The dynamics in which we deal with situations. It ain't always a verbal teaching moment. You know what I'm saying? It's just an observation sometimes of how things are dealt with different. You know what I'm saying? In the space. If you at home and you sitting back and you watching TV with your kids, right? And your woman in the kitchen cooking, right? And she step on something. And she like, I told y'all, get this off my floor. you know, and your shorty sitting there looking at you like, and you may tell them, just chill out, man. Just chill out. You know what I'm saying? Just go clean it up. So that's not something like you telling him. You know what I'm saying? In this moment, you displaying a behavior that's different from the behavior and the energy that's coming from there, right? But the balance is there to so it's able to, mitigate some things. And especially if it's a boy, he's seeing how, okay, you processing this different, right? Because she tripping. He thinking that, you thinking that, right? But you there to show him not to trip back. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what we missing, because a lot of these young guys, man, they go from 0 to 100 like that in their feelings. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know,
that's. I think that is very powerful in regards to how to maneuver through these situations in a different
yeah,
way, mentally, emotionally. I listen to a lot of T.O. Hardeman a lot, who's an interrupter down there in
yeah,
Chicago.
Mr.
And
Violence Interrupter.
yes, sir. One of the things that he talks about too is the most difficult thing I think in the work that you guys are doing that ends up getting a lot of people hurt in the crossfire too is the retaliation component, right? So how do you speak to a young man that has just been disrespected, that just been shot at, that just been punched in the face and didn't have the physical power to fight like he wanted to, and wants to retaliate and wants that revenge, and these are the things that get a lot of our young men killed. So how do you guys maneuver through those moments?
So, it ain't all this just talking down or talking into a cat, what I'm saying, about do the right thing, kumbaya, right? We have a method in which we operate in this industry, right? So what we do is, we check in with the brothers every day. Man, how you feeling from 1 to 10, right? We trying to gauge their temperature, right? Basically how they checking in is based off, what their mood is and what they done went through, or what they, it may be a good day, or they tripping with the girl, or some cats, they ops just, they ops to call you on social media and like, yeah, I see where your ass at. You know what I'm saying? So like, so we checking in with them. Now, what we have at Chicago Cred is what's called the 3 pillars. And what we do with these 3 pillars is basically we are very consistent. Every day we're talking about these 3 pillars. The first pillar is self-differentiation. The second pillar is self-regulation. And the third pillar is safety. Now, what does self-differentiation mean? Because most of the young men that's in our program, they come in through the group affiliation, right? How do you continue to love your guys, but at the same time, how do you see yourself? You know what I'm saying? You know, because the group is moving this way, does that automatically mean you got to move that way? Is the group part of the reason why your risk of being involved in gun violence is high? If that's the case, how do you reduce your risk? Because you in this program for us to help you reduce that risk, right? So we consistently talk about self-differentiation. How do you learn how to stand on your own 2 feet? You know what I'm saying? What becomes more important? The decisions you make, how will that affect your kids? How's that going to affect your woman, your life? You know what I'm saying? You paying bills, whatever the case may be, right? So, what becomes more important? Is it the block? Is it the guys? Or is it you? And all these other things that is now more important. Then we talk about self regulation, the power of the pause. We talk about cognitive behavior intervention. How do you allow situations that can create these moments of anger to where you know how to interrupt your or you can put the pause on doing something that will allow or don't allow you to make the right decision. If you have a situation that creates a feeling of anger, what type of action will that lead to? Normally, it has always led to you doing something, right? But when will you stop and just hit the pause button and say, you know what? Let me think about this, because if I do this, what is the consequence behind that, right? Even with retaliating, you know what I'm saying? I always tell these guys, if we playing a game of basketball, right? The goal is to score more buckets than your opponent, right? If I score more, I win, right? I say, but in this game y'all playing, if you keeping score, who winning? Even when the guys is up, y'all done killed 10 of my homies. We only killed 5 of y'all. Who winning? Because the game probably gonna end up being over when they kill you. You know what I'm saying? Now you done playing, but no one can ever win this game. And if I continue to go back and forth, we ain't never gonna be safe.
Man, that's powerful, man. That is powerful.
So we tapping into their common sense, man. It's not easy, man. You know what I'm saying? But and then we also relying on that maturity level, that maturation, because these guys, it's man, oh what a difference a day make, or just that's probably too short of a time, but a year. I take it. I give you an example, right? Let's say, for instance, you meet a group of young men. They all live on this block. Within a year time, somebody gonna get killed. That's a possibility. 2, 3 of them gonna go to jail, which they gonna be gone for a while. A couple of them gonna get a girlfriend. They gonna go live with their girlfriend, their baby mama. You know what I'm saying? A year from now, that block may be totally different. So now we're dealing with a different dynamic. You know what I'm saying? Now the block ain't that dangerous no more. Some things have changed. You know what I'm saying? Time has brought about change. Time has brought about some differences. You know what I'm saying? It shifted some things around. But it's a lot of what we up against before time changed too. You know what I'm saying? That we got to buy this time. We got to buy some time to, man, if I can get you to pay attention and come up in here every day, I guarantee you things going to be different from. I always tell dudes this. I say, man, the person you are today, was you that person 5 years ago? Absolutely not. So you think you're going to be the same person 5 years from now? Absolutely not. All I got to do is get you to be alive 5 years from now. Because I guarantee you're going to start seeing things different, bro. It's impossible for you to be the same person you is today 5 years from now, because you're not the same person today you was 5 years ago.
Great points. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just want to, play a quick little activity. We talked about some real heavy topics, so just dilute the moment a little bit. So it's called "What's Your Favorite?" Identifying just a few of your favorite things. Get to know you a little bit better. We talking about a lot of tense situations in your life and what you've been through. What's been your favorite way to relax?
But yeah, I like riding my bike in the summertime. Me and my wife, we really, as we get a little older, we trying to be more conscious. So we do a little bit more walking and, you know, uh, just trying to be more on top of our health. You know what I'm saying? So I enjoy it. She don't like walking, but she will, right? When we came to New York, we did a lot of walking. I think I got one day over 20,000 steps in. So,
I got to ask what your favorite food is in Chicago.
it's a little, so I love salmon, salads. Uh, you know, People talk about that Chicago pizza and stuff like that. I love pizza, but I had to, kind of fall back on it. But salmon, man, I love salmon. A good salad, you know what I'm saying?
What's been your favorite moment with one of your young guys, one of your mentees?
So this moment wasn't a good moment, but it was one of my best moments, right? One of my little guys, actually, Zay, the little brother in the documentary who's highlighted in there. Zay was on probation at one point, right? And he didn't show up for the program. So we trying to find him, like where he at, right? His mother called. She like, man, they locked him up last night. They say he didn't violate his probation because he was not going, he had failed all his drug tests. He was smoking weed, right? So I went to court for him the next day. He was in court. And I had approached the public defender. I was like, are you here? Are you representing, my guy, right? And she was like, no, if he ain't got no lawyer, I'm not his lawyer. I can't talk to you about him. I said, I'm just trying to find some information out because he's in my program, right? So she just blew me off, right? So I sat there for about an hour waiting on them to call Zay out. So eventually he comes from the back, right? He in the jumpsuit and everything, right? The public defender, because he didn't have a lawyer, ended up having to stand up for him, right? So the judge told Zay just like this: you didn't fail every drug test in the last 6 months. He said more than likely you'll be eating dinner tonight at Stateville, right? Basically telling him he's sending him to jail. He's sending him to prison, right? And he like, why should I not violate you? So Zay is telling him in this voice where he's so scared because he know he about to go to the joint, right? I'm going through this drug treatment program at my job. And he like, what job do you have that got a drug treatment program, right? So now the lawyer's like, hold on, Your Honor. It's a guy here who says he's in his program. Maybe he can explain it, right? And I'm sitting there like, oh man, they about to call me up here, and talk to the judge, right? So the judge like, where is he? So the judge like, come up here, young man. So I goes up there, right? And I'm like, well, Your Honor, this is not a job. He's in a program, right? We work with young men, who, I give them the spiel, that's at risk of being involved in gun violence. And Zay, basically, we have a construction program that he's in, right? But he does go through drug treatment, right? Classes. And I say, for all intents and purposes, Zay is one of our, best, participants, And the judge basically looked at me and it was like, is this a non-for-profit program? I'm like, yeah. He say, so basically you telling me that all my tax dollars is being wasted on him who just don't want to do right, right? And I'm like, man, the judge, he drugged me through over the coals, right? But then he looked at Zay and said, listen, if people can come and speak up for you, you know what I'm saying, and offer opportunities like this for you, you cannot throw these chances away. You know what I'm saying? And because this man has came to court to speak for you in your behalf, that's the only reason why you won't be eating dinner at Stateville tonight. You know what I'm saying? But I guarantee you, if you come back up here next month and that drug test ain't clean, can't nobody say you. So man, he released Zay. You know what I'm saying? And I was glad because I didn't even feel like going to court. I hate those court buildings. I knew I was gonna be there all day, but I was like, nah, I gotta go and find out what's going on with my little guy. Not knowing that I was gonna end up having to play Johnny Cochran, right? But yeah, that was kind of like one of my best moments, man, in the bad situation that I was able to, help that little brother.
Yes, sir. So, looking into the work that you do in your life, people would agree that you're doing some powerful work. You're saving lives. And I feel like sometimes, like, when we see some of these incidents happening on the news and these situations playing out in the Black community, in our communities, a lot of people sometimes have an idea like, well, I want to do something, but I'm not a Billy Moore. I can't get into these streets and interrupt violence and help these young guys like that. So, you and I have talked, and we've I think we both agreed that it's going to be on us to change our realities, and that no outside community is doing it. So everybody's not Billy Moore, but what do you think other people in different positions that want to assist and create a better community holistically, not just in Chicago, but in different cities and things like that, need to be doing?
Well, Billy Moore ain't always had a good name in Chicago. At one time, Billy Moore's name was pretty much synonymous with, that people didn't like me. You know what I'm saying? Because of what, not knowing me, but because of what I did, right? It's funny that you say that, right? Because I remember a situation where I seen a group of young men. I was driving past them, and I even write about it in my book, right? And because I had tents on my window, they didn't know who I was, right? And the way I was driving up the block, I wasn't going fast because they had these, speed bumps, right? But you could tell they was on point, and I didn't know how this was gonna play out because by the time I got up on them, they all had pulled guns out, right? And I'm like, damn, they look so young, right? So by the time I was able to get to the end of the block at the stop sign, I'm thinking, well, that was a close call. They could have easily just lit the car up, right? But at the same time, I'm seeing the 16-year-old Billy Moore back there and all of them. And if somebody would have talked to me that morning when they saw me with that gun, maybe I wouldn't have ended up going to prison and Benji wouldn't have lost his life. So I'm basically saying, what you gonna do, bro? You know what I'm saying? Because what could easily happen, I can leave and never go back and go home, turn on my TV and hear that a little girl got killed because she got caught in the crossfire. And guess what everybody say when they hear that on the news? Somebody need to do something about that, right? Who is that somebody? How often do we get a chance to go and stand in front of a young black man who's holding the gun ready to kill somebody? Those opportunities don't come around, right? We just hear about them. You know what I'm saying? But I had an opportunity to go and not just talk to one, it was four of them, right? So I decided to go back around and see if I could have a conversation with them. You know, I love my people, so I'm not afraid of my people, right? But I'm not stupid either, right? But I feel like, you know, the Bible say, blessed is the feet of the peacemaker on the mountain, right? So if I'm coming in peace, I feel like I'm gonna be received. You know what I'm saying? And I'm, for all intents and purposes, I am a peacemaker. So this time when I bend the corner and come back up the block, I got all my windows down so they can see me. They see all this, you know what I'm saying, this great beard, right? So they know that I'm no threat. And as I pull up, by this time, they not standing on in front of the house. They kind of like in the gangway. So I'm like, man, I just holler out my window, hey man, can I talk to y'all for a minute? And initially they kind of posturing up like, what's up? Like I say, hey man, I come in peace. I just want to have a conversation with y'all. You know, I don't mean no harm. I come to do no harm. I just want to talk, right? So they were like, all right, old school. Yeah, you could talk. What's up? What's up? So I pull over. I get out the car. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm like, man, how old, if you don't mind, how old are you guys? Man, they was young, man. I think the oldest one was like 17, the youngest one like maybe 15, right? And I was like, man, you know, I don't know what's going on, but something is, you know, and I feel like I just want to talk to you, brother, just to give y'all some words of advice. You know what I'm saying? And I say, if you don't believe me, Google me. You know what I'm saying? When I was about your age, bro, you know, I had a messed up situation happen to me, which sent me away for 20 years. I say, but if y'all do the same thing I did, you ain't going away for 20 years. You're going to go away for the rest of your life. If you kill somebody in Illinois, do you know you would do 100% of your time? Which means if they gave you 80 years, you're going to be 96 when you get out. You're going to be 97. You're going to be 90. You know what I'm saying? People don't live that long, bro. And I say, I'm not being funny, but bro, 15 years old, man, you ain't even really been with a woman, bro. And you ready to go spend the rest of your life in prison. That's a tragedy. And I don't want to see that for none of y'all. Man, because I love y'all, man. Man, I had them little dudes hugging and everything, hugging me and everything. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, man, what is it that'll get y'all out of this situation? Like going to work, getting a job, going to school, what? Because man, we can help. We can figure out something to where I don't have to worry about you on a fast track to prison. You know what I'm saying? But man, it was all good. What didn't happen is that I went home and turned on the news and heard about somebody dying over there, right? And man, bro, I promise you, this was in like 2018. I done drove down that block 100 times and ain't seen them little dudes ever again in life, man. And I just pray that they all, you know, that moment of me talking to them helped them. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't have nobody do that for me. You know what I'm saying? And I felt I was obligated to do that, man, because I seen, man, these young black cats out here, man, with these straps and they about to put it on somebody. And I can't just sit back and allow that to happen without saying something. So everybody can do something, bro. It's like
Yeah, just about to say
it ain't no Billy Moore, like it ain't no big B's and little U's. It's like, man, just get involved, man. How often check this out, how often do you think people ride past a group of young cats and ain't never gonna say nothing to them other than judge them? Look at them out here doing, you know what I'm saying? Man, stop by and have a conversation with them. You know what I'm saying, man? How y'all doing today, man? What's going on? What y'all got going on out here? You know what I'm saying? You know, y'all trying to make some money or what? Like, just talk. You know, see how you can get involved in their life and what they got going on in their life. You know what I'm saying? You may have some valuable information that you can pass on that they waiting to hear.
And I think that's important too, man. You said you came in peace and then you were respectful And I feel like sometimes some of the adults be scared because of how they think the kids are going to respond. But a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, if you come in peace and you're respectful, they're going to get that back to you, usually. So I think that's powerful. Yeah, man.
Peace
So
and respect is a universal language, man, and love. Because
mhm.
you also coming with love too. You're not gonna have that type of approach if you ain't got love in your heart for your people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well said. Yeah, man. So you've been doing just a lot of work regaining your name. Billy Moore, you said a lot of people didn't really think highly of you, at that young age, but you've been able to redeem yourself in the city of Chicago. And, now people are thinking about you very differently. So I think that your legacy is going to continue and because of the work that you're doing. But it's important for us, I think, to kind of define what we want our legacy to be. So with the work that you're doing in Chicago with these young men and the work that you've done with yourself, man, and your family, what is the legacy that you want the name Billy Moore to have when it's all said and done?
I'm glad it's not gonna be, just about the young man who took away Benji Wilson's life, because I mean it could have just been that, you know what I'm saying? But people whose life I helped to save is gonna speak for my legacy. You know what I'm saying? They gonna come forward and say, "Man, had it not been for this brother, you know what I'm saying? I probably would have lost my life, or ended up." So my legacy is gonna be defined. It's gonna be defined in other people's life and their successes, and it ain't necessarily mean that they that went on to create the next big thing, but there's a lot of brothers, man, who they just think different. You know what I'm saying? Because I had an opportunity to meet them, you know, and life is different because they think different. You know, I want to touch as many young people, man, as I can, just to see them thinking different about their circumstances and not basing their existence on the current moment that they find themselves living in. Because some of these moments feel like they ain't never gonna be different. That's a lie. You know what I'm saying? Your worst moment is just what that is, your worst moment. That don't guarantee that the next moment is gonna be what that worst moment was. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't if you don't believe that it's gonna be better, then I'm here to tell you that. And I think that's my legacy. I've been able to tell some young people, man, this ain't where it's at. This ain't how it's gonna always be. Trust and believe that. And they believe it and they move forward and they find out, yeah, you was right, man. And I appreciate you telling me that, you know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We see it, man. Oh man, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, man. And I think that you're doing some real work. That's not going to be in no textbooks or, in any violence prevention handbook or anything like that. This is like hands on real work in the streets. And I feel like, you guys are really soldiers out there making it happen and not just talking about it and saying like, how could we, figure out some curriculum to teach these kids or like, yeah, hands on. And I think a lot of our kids need that hands on, type of love, into the community. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, man.
I got two of them. One is from Frederick Douglass, and he said, "It's easier to raise strong children than to repair broken men." Man, that touched me so deep, right? Uh, because he right. Like we able to really be here to raise our kids, man. We don't have to worry about later on in life, broken adults. You know what I'm saying? And just trying to help them redo it. When we can do the preventative work, on the front end, right? It's easier to prevent people from jumping in the river than having to pull them out at the other end, right? And I guess I got to go with the title of my book. Um, you know, it says basically the title of my book is an African proverb. And when you think about my story, it's like the Billy Moore that was talked about at 16 was vilified, was demonized through the media, right? Because of a mistake that I had made, albeit a tragic mistake because somebody lost their life. You know, it says the tail of the hunt. It says the until the lion speaks. It's basically, I'm gonna read it for you. It says until the lion speaks, the tail of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So you think about how we paint this narrative around Chicago. Like you said, man, we hear Chicago in the news and, you know, you hear all this gun violence and, you know, drill music, you know what I'm saying? Like you say, you see the young cats you working with, you know what I'm saying? It's this narrative, like, you know, the hunter basically is painting this story, you know what I'm saying, how he killed that lion. And of course he gonna make himself seem like, you know, he was the baddest cat out there. But did you talk to that lion? Did the lion get a chance to tell his story of how he ended up, you know what I'm saying, as the victim in that situation, you know? Because the lion is a great beast, the king of the beast, right? So it's always, you know, gonna be a great thing for the hunter to talk about how he killed the lion, right? But until the lion speaks, you got to get a lion a chance to tell his story, to hear his side. You know what I'm saying? And the way they paint us, the way, you know, the narrative around our people, you know, is so diminished and so demonized and so criminalized. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's like we're not even human no more. We a thing. You know what I'm saying? To be looked at in such a negative way, you know. But when you sit down and you start talking to these cats and you get to know them on a personal level and you see that they love people and people love them and they got values and it's things that's important to them and they smart, you know what I'm saying? They intelligent, they have potential, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, so we have to be open to know that we still dealing with human beings. And really we judging them based off the decisions they make because they existing within these circumstances that we left for them. We ain't giving them opportunities.
Man, well said, man. Well said. I promise you, this wasn't planned 2 hours, but I could, you know, I couldn't cut you off, man. You had so much powerful words of wisdom, and like I
One
said,
thing, I'm sorry to cut you, but another thing that I always tell the young guys, which is one of my favorite, is that allow your intelligence to be superior to your emotion. Because if you can think faster than you feel, man, you'll live with less regret.
ooh, man, that's I'm gonna use that one. I'm gonna steal that one.
Now that's mine.
I'm gonna
Yes.
steal that one. I'm gonna quote you. I'm gonna quote you. That's
Yeah.
powerful, man. That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think definitely listeners, you should be inspired to do something, man. Like talk to the kids in your community, speak to the men, have conversations with them, try to be hands on and do some hands on things. I think if we all had that mindset, the mindset that you have to kind of interrupt things and to repeat, to deal with these young men before they become broken men, then we will fix a lot of the problems in our community. So I thank you for the work that you're doing, man, and you know, hopefully at some point we'll get you back on the
No doubt.
program.
No doubt.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the work you're doing, man. And listeners, definitely be inspired. Think about what you can do in your community. And all problems have solutions, regardless of what you think or what you've been told. Like even the violence in Chicago, there's a solution to it. And whatever's been done can be undone. Somebody can figure it out. We can figure it out. And nobody's coming out to help us. We got to figure these things out for ourselves. So shout out to the
Absolutely.
people that roll up their sleeves and putting in the work. And more of us got to do the same. So I appreciate you, Billy, and I'm inspired,
Thank you,
man.
my brother.
Yes, sir. And
Yes, sir.
listeners, remember, your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. If you can think it, you can do it. If you believe in it, you can be it. And if you fight for it, you can have it. The world is yours. This has been your host, Mr. G, and I will see you next time on MasterMine.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one starves illegal or you had it.